The first punch didn't shock me. It was the second, when Dad drove his knuckles into my ribs, while Mom quietly closed the curtains. And the third? The third came right after he hissed, "You're not worth keeping alive, Emily." My name is Emily Carter. I'm 28, and until that night, I still believed, foolishly, that even broken families had limits. Even cruel parents had a line they wouldn't cross. I found out I was wrong. It started 3 weeks before the beating, when I learned I needed emergency surgery. Nothing cosmetic, nothing optional. A life-saving operation. A procedure that could prevent organ failure if done in time. I sat across from my parents, hands shaking, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd show the love I'd spent my entire childhood trying to earn. Dad didn't even look up from his phone. "How much?" "$28,000, I whispered. He scoffed. "Then die cheaper." Mom flinched, but didn't defend me. She never did. I had no savings. Their financial control was suffocating. I lived in their guest house, worked for Dad's company for a humiliatingly low salary, and every time I tried to leave, he reminded me of the debts he claimed I owed him. That night, when I confronted them again, when I said, trembling, that without the surgery I could literally die, Dad exploded. He said I was an investment that never paid off, a burden, a useless weight. But when he grabbed my arm to drag me outside, Mom stepped forward, not to stop him, but to warn him. "Not in front of the neighbors. Take her inside." The world tilted. My own mother, my last tiny hope, was trying to protect his reputation, not my life. Dad shoved me against the wall, yelling that I wanted attention, that I fabricated symptoms for pity. The beating came fast and cruel, a blur of fists and boots. Mom watched in silence. Her breathing was steady, her eyes blank. When he finally kicked me toward the door and shouted, "Get out and don't come back unless you're dead or sorry," I tasted blood and something colder. Clarity. I staggered out into the night, clutching my ribs, vision blurry, heart breaking, but mind awakening. Something inside me shifted, hardened, sharpened. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying and freeing. They didn't think I had the strength to survive without them. They were about to learn how wrong they were, and how expensive that mistake would be. I didn't go to the hospital that night. I couldn't. Dad had canceled my insurance months earlier to cut unnecessary expenses, and I only discovered it when the ER refused to admit me without a massive upfront payment. So instead, I limped to the only place I could think of, my old car. A rusted blue sedan Dad refused to let me sell because it keeps you from getting cocky. I slid into the driver's seat, ribs throbbing, eyes stinging, and for the first time in 28 years, the silence felt honest. No fake apologies. No guilt. No manipulation. Just pain and the truth beneath it. My parents had never loved me. They loved control. And I had been too desperate for scraps of affection to see it clearly. Growing up, Dad treated me less like a daughter and more like an unpaid intern. Every chore was training. Every good grade was expected. Every failure, real or imagined, was a personal insult to him. Mom operated like his quiet shadow, always present, never resisting. She taught me early that love was conditional, affection was earned, and survival meant obedience. Whenever I dreamed of moving out, Dad dangled opportunities that were nothing more than traps. A job at his company with no advancement. A room in the guest house that he called rent-free but monitored like a prison. A car I couldn't legally sell because he kept the title. Every part of my life existed under his thumb. And now, when I needed help the most, he chose violence over compassion. Control over humanity. Ego over my life. But here's what they didn't know. While Dad spent years reminding me I was nothing, I'd quietly been learning everything. How his business worked, where his vulnerabilities were, which people despised him behind closed doors, and what Mom desperately hid from him. I never intended to use any of it. But desperation has a way of rearranging mercy. I sat in that cold car, trembling, scrolling through my phone with shaky fingers, checking my test results again. Surgery needed soon. Days, not months. My parents had refused. But there were other options. And other people watching. People who owed me favors. People Dad never knew I helped. People who hated him more than I ever realized. My ribs screamed when I leaned back, but a new thought cut through the pain, sharp and electrifying. If my parents wanted me gone so badly, maybe it was time I disappeared from their lives and reappeared where it hurt them most. A vibration buzzed in my hand. A message. From someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. I heard what happened. Meet me tomorrow. We need to talk. My breath caught, because that someone was the last person my parents ever wanted near me. I barely slept. Every inhale burned. Every exhale trembled. By morning, I looked like a ghost wearing bruises. But the message kept flashing in my mind. Meet me tomorrow. The sender's name was impossible to ignore. Daniel Brooks, Dad's former business partner. The man Dad publicly humiliated, financially ruined, and then framed for embezzlement to save his own reputation. Daniel had always been kind to me. Too kind, according to Dad, who accused me of being ungrateful every time Daniel showed basic decency. When Daniel disappeared after the scandal, I assumed he'd moved states, maybe countries. But he hadn't. He'd been watching. And now he wanted to talk. I drove to the cafe we used to meet at when he mentored me during my brief attempt to escape Dad's company. It was empty except for him. Older, sharper, and carrying the kind of calm that comes from surviving hell. His eyes widened when he saw my bruises. Jesus, Emily, he finally snapped, didn't he? I swallowed hard. He refused to pay for my surgery. He leaned back, expression darkening. Of course he did. Anything he can't control, he destroys. Hearing someone else say it out loud made something inside me crack open. For the first time in years, I didn't feel crazy. I felt seen. Daniel tapped his fingers on the table. I've kept quiet for 5 years. But I still have every file, every recording, every email your father used to bury me. He leaned closer. And I know where he's most vulnerable now. My heart pounded. Why tell me this? Because you, Emily, are the one person he underestimated. The one person he thought he'd broken. His voice lowered. And because you're dying. And he doesn't care. The truth hit like ice in my veins. Daniel wasn't offering sympathy. He was offering a weapon. But before I could respond, the cafe door opened, and my stomach dropped. Mom walked in. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, sitting with the man Dad hated most. She froze. I froze. Then her lips parted in a whisper sharp enough to slice bone. Emily, what have you done? Her hand reached into her purse. Not for a phone. Not for keys. For something far more dangerous. For a split second, I couldn't breathe. Mom's hand dipped deeper into her purse, and Daniel's body tensed like he already knew what was coming. Then she pulled it out. Not a weapon. A camera. A tiny silver digital camera she used only for one purpose. Collecting evidence for Dad to twist later. She raised it, the flash exploding across the cafe. Click. 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 Each shutter sound felt like another knife carving into my skin. Mom, stop. I lurched forward, ribs screaming. She didn't. She just kept taking pictures, her voice dripping with icy satisfaction. You had one job, Emily. Stay away from him. Daniel stood. Linda, enough. Don't speak to me, she snapped, stepping back as if he carried disease. My husband was right. You're poison. And now she's infected too. The room spun. Not from pain. From betrayal so deep it rattled something ancient in my bones. Mom turned to me. You think Dad refusing your surgery was cruel? This, she gestured at Daniel, then at me. This will kill him faster than your little medical condition. She leaned in, whispering so only I could hear. Maybe that's for the best. I stared at her. At the woman who tucked me in at night. Who braided my hair. Who smiled in family pictures while hiding bruises of her own. Who chose fear over love, always. But this wasn't fear. This was loyalty. Twisted, blind loyalty to a man who valued reputation more than life. Daniel's jaw clenched. Linda, she came to me because she needs help. Your husband nearly put her in the hospital. Mom shrugged. If she had listened to him, he wouldn't have needed to touch her. The word needed shattered something in me. I stepped back. Then another step. The cafe felt too small, the air too heavy, my mother's eyes too calm. Emily, she continued, voice cool and practiced, you're going to come home. You're going to apologize. And you're going to destroy any connection you still have with this man. If you don't, she lifted the camera. These pictures will go exactly where they need to go. A threat, a promise, a noose. She turned to leave. But at the doorway she paused, looking over her shoulder with chilling certainty. You cannot survive without us. Don't embarrass yourself trying. The door closed behind her, bells chiming like a funeral. I stood frozen. Daniel exhaled slowly. Emily, they've just declared war. And for the first time that day, I felt something dangerous rise in me.
Calm.
End of part 4. Say part 5. You said. 5 ChatGPT said. Part 5, 380 words. Pain, calm, strategy, intelligent revenge plan begins. I didn't cry when Mom left. I didn't collapse or plead or let the panic swallow me the way it used to. Instead, everything went quiet. A terrifying, perfect quiet. Daniel watched me carefully. Emily talked to me. What's going on in your head? I pressed a hand against my bruised ribs, inhaled slowly, and finally said the words I had never allowed myself to think. I'm done trying to survive with them. The only way to survive is to outsmart them. Daniel nodded slowly, as if he'd been waiting years to hear those exact words. So we drove to his office, a small, private workspace above an old bookstore, quiet and hidden. Inside, he unlocked a drawer and placed a thick folder on the table. This, he said, tapping it, is every illegal transaction your father ever made in the 5 years before he ruined me. My breath hitched. Emails, recordings, bank transfers, manipulated tax records, proof of employee mistreatment, documents showing he'd siphoned money through fake vendors, including one under Mom's name. I wasn't prepared for that. She helped him. I whispered. Daniel hesitated. She didn't just help. She signed off on half of it. My chest tightened in a new way. Mom wasn't a victim. She wasn't trapped. She was a willing architect of the monster who destroyed us both. I stared at the evidence. At the lives my parents had crushed to protect their empire. At the signatures, the forged dates, the cruel strategies disguised as business decisions. Then a thought surfaced, sharp, strategic, deliberate. I didn't need to expose them yet. I needed them to expose themselves. Because my father was arrogant, and arrogance is predictable. He thinks I'm weak, I murmured. He thinks I'll crawl back and beg. Daniel nodded. He'll expect fear.
Exactly.
So I'll give him something else. I lifted the folder. Silence. Daniel's eyebrows rose. What does silence get you? Time. I straightened, the pain dull, but my mind blazing. He kicked me out. Good. That means I'm no longer his dependent. He wants me gone?
Perfect.
I'll disappear completely.
No calls.
No messages. No trace. And meanwhile? Daniel asked. Meanwhile, I said, opening the folder again. I build. I document. I prepare. My voice lowered into something colder than revenge. When I'm done, they won't lose money. They'll lose everything. Their reputation. Their home. Their company. Their friends. Their safety net. Daniel exhaled, impressed. You're thinking bigger than punishment. I'm thinking justice. But justice needed one more ingredient. A way back into Dad's company, quietly, invisibly, through the very systems he thought he controlled. A slow smile curved on my lips. I know exactly how to do it. The first step to destroying a man like my father wasn't exposing him. It was letting him believe he'd already won. So I vanished. No calls. No texts. No social media. My phone stayed off except for the few people who actually cared whether I lived or died. Daniel, my doctor, and a lawyer he introduced me to. Meanwhile, Dad spiraled exactly as expected. 3 days after I disappeared, Daniel forwarded me a voicemail Dad had left on his old business line. If Emily contacts you, you tell her she's finished. She's not stepping foot in my company again. I cut her access to everything. Access. That was the word that made me smile. Because Dad didn't know the one thing I'd always kept hidden from him. Before he demoted me to paperwork and coffee runs, I worked briefly in the IT department. Long enough to understand the internal system. Long enough to memorize one unchangeable weakness. Dad's entire network used an outdated legacy program protected by passwords he refused to update, including the financial management system, and who still had an old login tied to that system.
Me.
Dad thought he revoked it. He didn't know about the backup access the IT lead secretly created for me after Dad screamed at me until I cried. I logged in from Daniel's office. The screen loaded. Every department, every transaction, every shell account, every fraudulent vendor. Daniel leaned over my shoulder. You realize what you have here, right? Oh, I do, I murmured. I didn't drain his accounts. I didn't delete files. I didn't touch the money at all. I did something smarter. I mirrored everything. Every illegal transfer duplicated. Every forged signature recorded. Every fake vendor linked to Mom's name neatly copied into a secure folder, time-stamped, backed up, unalterable. Then I set up a scheduled auto-transfer, not of money, but of information. If my parents so much as tried to track me, threaten me, or file anything against me, the files would instantly forward to the IRS, the state attorney, the Department of Labor, 2 journalists Dad despised, and his biggest competitor. A dead man's switch. Daniel stared at me like he'd just witnessed fire being invented. Emily, this is brilliant. It's not revenge yet, I said softly. It's insurance. The revenge came next. The moment Dad realized something was wrong with his company, he'd come looking for answers. He'd believe Mom. He'd blame Daniel. But he'd never see me coming. Because I wasn't destroying him from the outside. I was already inside his empire, quietly tightening every screw until the whole structure collapsed under its own corruption. And tomorrow it would begin. The collapse didn't start with sirens or headlines. It started with a phone call. Not to me.
To Mom.
Daniel played the voicemail for me. Speaker on the table between us. Dad's voice was strained, angry in a way that only happened when he'd lost control. Linda, where are you? The auditors showed up unannounced. They're asking about vendor accounts I've never heard of. Your name is on half of them. How the hell is your name on them? Mom's voice was muffled, panicked. I don't know. Maybe it's a glitch. A glitch. Dad roared. The IRS doesn't do glitches. Someone's inside my system. Someone mirroring transactions. Someone who knows exactly where to look. Daniel glanced at me. I stayed quiet. Dad continued, voice dropping into a cold whisper that used to freeze my childhood. Find Emily.
I don't care how.
She's behind this. Mom inhaled sharply.
No.
She's too weak. She's sick. Don't defend her. Something slammed. Maybe his fist on the desk. She did this. She wants to destroy us. I should have thrown her out years ago. The call ended with the sound of something breaking. I felt nothing. Not fear. Not guilt. Just a quiet, steady resolve. Mom tried to call me next. Then text. Then voicemail. Emily, darling, we just want to talk. Your father is under stress. Come home, and we can fix all of this. Please don't do anything stupid. Her voice trembled, but it wasn't worry for me. It was worry for their empire. The empire I'd spent years helping uphold. The empire they built on fear, lies, and my obedience.
Daniel looked at me.
They're panicking. This is the moment. What do you want to do next? I swallowed, feeling the weight of years pressing against my ribs. Not the broken ones, the invisible ones. I want them to understand, I whispered, what it feels like to lose control, to be powerless, to be discarded. Daniel nodded. Then it's time. We didn't need to break the company ourselves. We just needed to let the truth surface. And the truth was already spreading. By evening, 3 employees had emailed Daniel anonymously, saying Dad had interrogated them, accusing them of being traitors. One claimed he'd smashed a computer. Another said Mom had been crying in her car for an hour. A third said agents visited the office again, this time with more questions. The cracks were widening. And tomorrow morning, I was going to finish what they started when they beat me, bruised me, and abandoned me to die. Because the final blow wasn't files, wasn't exposure, wasn't revenge. It was me walking through their front door.
Alive.
Unbroken. And holding the truth they thought I'd never have the strength to use. I arrived at my parents' house at 9 a.m. sharp. Not the guest house. Not the back door. Not sneaking in like a frightened child. I walked up the front steps and rang the bell. Mom opened the door, and her face drained of color. Emily. Her voice cracked. You're alive. I stepped inside without waiting for permission. Disappointed. She flinched, but I didn't slow down. I walked straight into the living room where Dad stood hunched over stacks of documents, eyes red, tie loosened, hair disheveled.
He froze when he saw me.
For a long, thick moment, no one breathed. Then, you. Just one word. Venomous. Afraid. I'd